Welcome back, Rule fans. My name is Cam Wicker, and as always, I'm joined with,
Zach Moreth.
and you are listening to another episode of the Rebel Talk presented by the Rebel Walk. So, welcome back, guys. As another week of Ole Miss sports passes by, we enter another week of Ole Miss football. Also, talking a little bit about Ole Miss basketball this week coming up. We have men's exhibition match this Sunday, women's exhibition match next Monday, not this Monday today, but next Monday. Women's will have an exhibition match as well. We'll talk both about those teams in a little bit, and we'll talk a little bit about just kind of the past bye week for Ole Miss, kind of like a little bit of injury report, a little bit what Oklahoma, South Carolina looked like, and also Kiffin and Reese McIntyre stepped to the podium today and talked a little bit about just the bye week and just updates about the Ole Miss team in general. We're going to start off with a little bit of Ole Miss men's hoops. There will be an exhibition match on the 27th at 11 a.m. against Illinois. Should be an interesting matchup in that one. Illinois not going to be a slouch over team. I don't think they're ranked in the preseason, but it's going to be probably a good matchup for Ole Miss. That's not an actual game, just to see where the team's kind of at, know who's kind of going to be playing for Ole Miss. Obviously, probably most guys will be playing this game, at least probably everyone that's on the roster, just to see where everyone where Beard can kind of evaluate his guys. But the starting lineup that we are projecting we'll see is Sean Padula, Matt Morrell, Dre Davis, Jamin Brakefield, Malik Dia. And that's what we believe we'll see on the floor for that first game of the season. And that's what we'll probably see this Sunday against Illinois.
Yeah, absolutely, Cam. And again, Illinois, Brad Underwood's one of the best coaches in college basketball. They're an elite program. And it's kind of a testing point for Ole Miss because they're going against a team that, they lost a lot of guys, but they still have experience. They're coming off a really good March Madness run. And it's going to tell us exactly what's going on with this team and, our expectations heading into the season. Going into that non-conference schedule here, there's going to be 12 non-conference games before SEC play starts, kind of spread out over the months of November and December. Some notables, there are about 4 of them that I want to point out here, Cam. That matchup in South Haven, which is the neutral site, they call it, clearly not a neutral site, against Colorado State. That'll basically be another home game on November 16th, at BYU on November 28th, at Louisville on December 3rd, and at Memphis on December 28th. Those are the 4 games that I would consider toss-ups right now. I think Ole Miss has the potential to win all of them. But, there's also that equal potential that they could lose 2 or 3 or 1. So we'll see, But this is a team that has this is the first time they're ranked since the 90s, Cam, before the season.
Preseason ranking,
high expectations. One of the best coaches in college basketball leading the way. A ton of transfers, but at the same time, a ton of veterans. I think you're going to see a lot of leadership, and I think that's something that is going to stand out from this team from the get-go. I also think it's something we're going to see against Illinois because I think Ole Miss is really going to bring it and show that they're ready to be contenders, man.
Absolutely, and you touched on a little bit there. Beard being one of the best coaches in the country. Beard is more of a defensive-minded coach, as we know in the past at Texas Tech, and other places he's been. Wasn't a great defense for the Ole Miss basketball team last year, to say the least. It just wasn't. It wasn't good rebounding. It wasn't good just playing defense as a whole throughout the games. Even sometimes where you were playing good defense in the first half will fall apart in the second half. So I believe we'll see a lot different of a defensive approach from this Ole Miss team this year. Like Zach said again, pretty much a whole rebuild of this roster almost. Kept a lot of core guys that you really needed in Juju Murray, Matt Morrell, Jamin Brakefield, TJ Caldwell. A lot of guys. I mean, Robert Coward, who's going to defend. You got guys like that who kind of keep the core there, but then he went and got a bunch of guys that are just going to come out here and defend the basketball, rebound the basketball. Malik Dia, Dre Davis, Mikael Brown-Jones. Talked about it a little bit before the podcast with Mikael Brown-Jones. Wouldn't be surprised if we see him in the starting lineup at some point later this season. Obviously, Jamin Brakefield being that, I guess, fifth-year guy now at Ole Miss, kind of just knowing this system, knowing this Beard system, too, from last year. We'll expect to see him in that starting lineup. And, Brakefield's going to average about 12-7 a game like he usually does. And we'll see how he develops on the defensive end and on shot creating like he's struggled with in the past. But we'll have to see where Mikael Brown-Jones and John Ball kind of play into that role. We talked about it a little bit too before the podcast. Juju Murray might not be in that 6-man role like some people think he may be, just because the depth on that defense. There might be, on that bench, there might be just be a bunch of guys in a 6-man role until they kind of figure out what's going to happen there. Some other dates I wanted to add to your dates, Zach. November 4th is the first game of the season, first regular season for the Rebels against Long Island. That'll be in the Pavilion. November 4th at 7:30 p.m. That's on a Monday. And then Grambling State later that week in the Pavilion as well. Last year, like you said, this is an Ole Miss team that could possibly go undefeated in the non-conference. Last year, they did go undefeated in the non-conference. Obviously, a little bit tougher of a non-conference schedule this time this year. Chris Beard even admitted to it last year. You don't that first year with a program, you kind of want to have that non-conference schedule kind of just it's, I guess, easy as possible in that first year to kind of glide through it. Didn't really work out for them when it got to the conference play last year. So we'll see how that works this year, playing a tougher schedule. And I believe that it'll be a lot tougher of a schedule in the non-conference than it was a year ago. And we'll have to see that falls into play when SEC play rolls around.
Yeah, absolutely, Cam. And it's almost like, I don't want to directly compare, but it feels like football uses a lighter approach in spring and fall ball. And now they're coming out here and they're getting smacked against the wall by Kentucky and LSU. Last year, Ole Miss basketball, lighter approach for that non-conference schedule. And SEC play started, what happened? They got humbled really quickly. So hopefully, this move by Beard is not only to prepare them, but also just really get them fired up to play some SEC ball. Because I know after you play 12 non-con opponents, it gets kind of stale. But again, going into this year, you have pretty solid opponents, especially, a huge rivalry game against Memphis. And Louisville is an incredible program. I know they've been struggling as of late, but they're always a very good team, always seem to be contenders. I want to go back on Jamin Brakefield. First off, weird that he started his career at Duke. It's hard to kind of wrap my head around that. But obviously, he's been at Ole Miss. He's a Mississippi guy. One of the things Beard talked about in the offseason was getting Brakefield to look and appear a little more athletic. And it sounds bland, but a guy who's a little faster, who can jump a little higher, because all the skills are there for Brakefield. He's one of the most skilled players on the court usually. He's a good ball handler, even though he's 6'8", he possesses a good frame. He's also an elite finisher, and he can shoot the ball a little bit. So keeping that energy and that athleticism going around the whole game is going to be key. But I also think it'll be easy for him to do that when you're able to rotate with Dre Davis, Mikael Brown-Jones. You can throw John Ball in there. There's a lot more options and a lot more depth. So it's going to be a really exciting season. I think, again, the potential is through the roof for Chris Beard.
Absolutely. And with just Brakefield, other guys that return to this team in general, I believe Beard even said it at SEC Media Days. You kind of want to see where these guys take the next step, especially Matt Morrell, who got the All-SEC second-team nod. He's gotten multiple honors in the past. He's one of the Ole Miss greats, really, in the time he's been here. He just doesn't really have the winning percentage. And for this Ole Miss team to win, they're going to need a consistent Matt Morrell day in and day out. Beard touched on that. He's going to need that Matt Morrell. We're just going to be a career high year for him in multiple categories. You're going to need that next step from Juju Murray to see if Juju Murray kind of developed on the defensive end a little bit and a little bit more on the shot making decisions. On the shot decisions, and then we'll have to see where younger guys like Eduardo Claffey and John Ball step into their role early in the year, because those are two very talented guys who we're not sure where their role is on this team yet. Again, Ole Miss basketball will be this Sunday, October 27th at 11 a.m. against Illinois. Exhibition match. It's a charity game. It will not count towards a regular season record for either team. Jumping into women's hoops now, ranked 20th in the season. I talked about it in the last podcast a little bit. I don't like that ranking. Coach O would say, even other coaches would also say it's a preseason ranking, doesn't really mean much. But if this does mean much, I guess this stat means much a little bit to me. A secret scrimmage was held, I guess today or yesterday. Teams do this before the season a lot in basketball, a little bit in baseball too. Not so much in football. You don't really see it anymore. Maybe I think in older days they used to do that a little bit more, where they would play other teams in a spring game. But women's basketball for Ole Miss played Louisville, who's ranked number 17th in the preseason rankings. and beat them by 20 in a secret scrimmage. I guess it was today or yesterday. So, I mean, that's good news for this Ole Miss team who is got a lot of new faces on it. Probably going to have a couple new faces in that starting lineup. Obviously, getting KK Dean's back, and they'll have an exhibition game, like I said, the day after the men's team, and we'll have to see where kind of they build off of that Louisville scrimmage. But it's good news, I guess, from last year you lose, or
Yeah.
2 years ago when you lose again to Louisville in that SEC ACC challenge, knowing that those steps you took to get here now.
Exactly, Kim. And I keep talking about football because it's fall and it's wrapped around my head. But again, I mentioned it on the podcast. This is one of those years where I said this before, but a lot of players had that option to leave, and Coach Yo, like Kiffin did, was able to return a lot of them. You're going to see a lot of familiar faces in that starting lineup, even coming off the bench. Players who were able to sit here at Ole Miss and develop and really start to learn the culture of Coach Yo and her program. And same deal with Chris Beard. Like this has a chance to be a special season for both men's and women's. And going to Louisville, wherever the game was held, but winning by 17 it's a promising sign. And I think this is a team who's going to, right from the start, they're going to show you why they should be ranked higher than 20th. They have so much experience, so much grit, it feels like. And again, it's several first-round WNBA draft picks, in my opinion. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be incredible. And I think shout out to Coach Yo. She does a fantastic job. And her recruiting, it's going to pay off, and it's going to show right out of the gate for Ole Miss.
Absolutely. And they have pretty much a brand new coaching staff around her. So I have to see how they kind of build off that. Obviously, looked pretty good in that scrimmage game. Don't really know off of what the stats were or anything off any of the players, but all around seems like they had a pretty successful day in that scrimmage game. But yeah, brand new coaching staff for this Rebel team, ranked 20th in the country. They'll open the regular season play November 4th in Paris, France, against Juju Watkins and the number 3 ranked USC Trojans. Be a big time matchup there. We know how good Juju Watkins is. She's supposed to be that next Caitlin Clark type of player who's averaging 30 plus a game a season. We saw what she did as a freshman. And I'm sure she's only gotten better especially from the offseason videos I've seen of her training and working on her game. First home game for the Rebels will be November 10th against Arkansas Pine Bluff. I believe that's one of Coach Yo's alumni. I believe she's got alumni from 2 different schools. I believe that's one of them. So it'll be
there you go.
a nice matchup for Coach Yo there. And then so a later non-conference matchup against number 9 NC State in the SEC ACC Challenge. That should be a tough one for them, a little test to start the season there. I believe they go to the Bahamas again for that tournament they have in the Bahamas since Coach Yo's been the coach here. And then January 2nd, they'll have their first SEC game against Auburn. We know this is a Coach Yo team that we know Coach Yo teams in the past have kind of turned it on a little bit in SEC play, especially down the stretch. So we'll have to see how this team kind of develops in the non-conference where they've struggled in past years going into this season. Projected lineup I have for this women's team, I haven't really seen a lot of articles on it, but I'm just going to go off of just my knowledge and what I think Coach Yo might throw out there for that exhibition game coming up on Monday. KK Dean's at the point guard, Ayanna Thompson or Tamia Sadler at the shooting guard. I know Tamia Sadler was a point guard at Colorado. She's probably going to be more of a point guard role in this team. We'll have to see if she works her way into the starting lineup and is on the floor at the same time as KK Dean's. And then Kennedy Ty Williams, we saw that she's been able to handle the ball in the past when KK Dean's went down. She'll probably work back into that small forward shooting guard type role that she's been in the past. And Maddie Scott, we know she can play anywhere on the floor. She'll probably work in at the 4 mostly, starting in the lineup. And then Carissa Richardson, who I believe is going to take a really big step from last year. We saw the steps that she took last year just throughout the season, just shooting and the shot curating. I think the only thing she really needed to work on was defense and rebounding. And I'm sure Coach Yo did something in the offseason to kind of work on that with her. And then some players on the bench, some notable names on the bench for Coach Yo, Christina Uwala and Star Jacobs, who I believe could be playing significant roles in this team throughout the winter.
Yeah, and again, I want to hone in on Carissa Richardson here. The times that I watched her play, it feels like her ceiling doesn't really have a limit to it. She has a great size, and it feels like, again, there's a lot of potential in her shooting game, rebounding, a lot of work to do with finishing, but these are things that can be improved as you get older and as you develop more skill and more experience and you hang around Coach Yo and all these decent players. And I think, again, we're going to see her take that next step. Also, Maddie Scott is going to be a menace on the floor. so excited that we were able to get her back, and she's going to do incredible things this year.
Absolutely. So get ready to watch Team 50. It'll be next Monday against, it'll be next Monday against Christian Brothers in their exhibition game. And we'll have to see where this Team 50, I believe they were ranked at fifth or fourth in the preseason rankings for the SEC. Now with Texas and Oklahoma being added to the conference, should be a little bit tougher. Where this Ole Miss team kind of been battling at the top with LSU and South Carolina and Tennessee lately. So we'll add two more teams to the mix who are really good basketball programs in Texas and Oklahoma. So we'll have to see where Ole Miss women's hoops matches up when that comes along. Jumping into football, was a pretty good bye week, good off week, I'd say, at least from an Ole Miss fan point of view. You got to rest and not have to worry about watching a game on Saturday. Got to watch some good football games this past weekend: Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia, Texas, some other good games as well. But wanted to talk a little bit just about the Oklahoma, South Carolina matchups and the football pressers from this past week. If you want to go ahead and get it started, Zach.
Yeah, Ole Miss did not lose this weekend. I was very excited about it. Also, yeah, how about the SEC games? Tennessee, Bama. Bama kind of choked again. That's okay. I guess that's what happens, under the Tennessee lights. And then Georgia, Texas. Georgia showing that, they're probably the best team in the SEC from this point moving forward. But yeah, moving into the press conferences, looking at one of the first quotes that Lane says, he talks about how Pegues and Parrish had played the last two games. I want to say he said something about them being extremely hurt or very banged up, something like that. What is Henry Parrish doing starting extremely banged up, very hurt, when you have Ulysses Bentley on the sideline, Cam? I'll never understand it. And I post the quote on Twitter and everyone seems to be in agreement. If someone's hurt and there's a player who's equal to them or potentially better than them, the pro mindset says that you should play them. The pro mindset that Lane Kiffin lives and dies by says you probably shouldn't play the guy that's hurt, because not only is it going to potentially further his injury, but it's also going to hurt the production of the offense. So strange, really strange, and it was a telling quote for him to say. Again, disappointing. Moving into some offensive line talk, it sounds like we're going to have some guys back. I expect Jaden Williams to come back. The question Lane was asked was if Jaden Williams would come back at any point in the season, and Lane said he definitely anticipates it. He also said he also anticipates some guys come back this week. So I can almost guarantee Jeremy James will be out there. Jaquan Scott's he's been in and out, Cam. I think he'll be out there moving in guard or center, wherever that is. And also Jaden Williams, the best graded blocker on the team, who's been out for a long time here. He plays that left tackle spot and he plays it well. He's extremely athletic. Ole Miss is going to need him out there. And then just the last thing I want to touch on from the press conference, for those who don't know, Joe John Finley, who's the current play caller for Oklahoma, he was the passing game coordinator with Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss in 2020. Oklahoma just fired their offensive coordinator, so Finley got upgraded, and he'll be calling the plays against Ole Miss in his visit back to Oxford. Lane was asked if he thought there would be any benefit to that, if Lane kind of knew what type of play calling style he was going to anticipate from him. And I'm sure there's a little bit of insight, but Lane denied it. He said Finley has never called plays, so I don't really know what to expect, which I think is true. But I also think, when you have a guy in your staff who's the passing game coordinator, you can figure out a little bit about what he thinks. And I think they're going to use Jackson Arnold, and I think they're going to throw the ball a lot.
Absolutely. A couple of things I wanted to touch on from the interviews. From the press conferences today, going back to the OC thing. I know Kiffin talked a lot about that today. Was asked a lot of questions about Joe John Finley being promoted to OC over at Oklahoma, but he also answered the question about the criticism that Charlie Wise has faced over the past couple of weeks as the OC at Ole Miss. Us as writers, we know how you guys feel about Charlie Wise Jr. We see the comments, but from a Lane Kiffin point of view here, you have to think about where Oklahoma is at as a program right now, where Ole Miss is at as a program right now, and the decision that firing a coordinator, especially an offensive coordinator, middle of the season when you're 5-2 and still in the top 25 with the potential to make a run towards a playoff spot later in the year. A lot of consequences come with that. A lot of shifting and players' feelings come with that.
Yeah.
With changing coaches. So you have to just kind of understand where Lane Kiffin is sitting at in that position right now. Nothing in against Charlie Wise. Obviously, we don't know what goes on in that headset and goes on in the booth upstairs with the coordinators, but it just hasn't looked great for Ole Miss on the offensive side of the ball these past couple weeks, especially since SEC play has started. But another thing, going off a little bit of the linemen as well too, I wanted to say I know there wasn't really a lot of names that Reese McIntyre or Kiffin threw out there other than Jaden Williams, but like you said, Jaquan Scott's probably going to be one of those guys that comes back, and I'm assuming this means Jeremy James is probably a full go now. We'll probably see him rotated in at some point. Haven't really seen much out of him since he went down, even though he was, I guess, activated, 2 weeks ago now.
Yeah.
So we'll probably have to see where he fits in this weekend, but I'm assuming it'll probably be somewhere at guard or the right tackle spot. And Micah Pettis could be shifting around like he did a week ago as well against LSU. And then also Caleb Warren, we hadn't really seen him much since his return, other than a little bit in that South Carolina game. We didn't see much out of him in the LSU game. So I have to see where he fits in coming up this weekend against Oklahoma. But Reese McIntyre seems like he's the guy moving forward. Obviously, Jaquan Scott has been noted to play center over the time throughout fall camp as well. So we'll have to see where he fits in on the offensive line. So it's going to be – I know Kiffin said for sure that there's going to be some shuffling on this offensive line. He said that after the LSU game, and he said that pretty much today as well. So we'll have to see where that is at moving forward. And then lastly, I wanted to touch a little bit on just the mental state that Kiffin kind of – said this team was in right now. He talked a lot about focusing on yourself, focusing on just themselves as a team on getting better. This is a unique matchup against Oklahoma. A lot of unknowns that Kiffin stated in this. Obviously, the coordinator situation, and then obviously the quarterback situation for Oklahoma with Jackson Arnold and Michael Hawkins Jr. Jackson Arnold came back last week, seemed to look pretty solid, even though they lost the game. He seemed to kind of, I guess, control the game a little bit better than Michael Hawkins Jr. had been controlling the game. Obviously, Oklahoma's offense still struggled a lot, turned the ball over twice, both of them, well, 3 times, I believe, two of them resulting in touchdowns for South Carolina. So it doesn't look great on offense for Oklahoma either way. But it just seems like there will be a lot of change and unknowns between this Oklahoma team. Also, 5 receivers out earlier this year. I'm pretty sure they'll probably be down 2 to 3 this weekend. We'll have to see where they're at in the injury report. But like Lane Kiffin said, this is a moment in time where Ole Miss feels like they need to focus on themselves and improving into the next week. And I think that's really just the best process. This is a team that you should be. You open up as a 21-point favorite. Me and Zach talked about it before the podcast earlier today. Doesn't seem like this Ole Miss team should be a 21-point favorite. But if people believe this Ole Miss team is a 21-point favorite, then they should believe they're a 21-point favorite and go in there and play Oklahoma like it.
Yeah, the line is insane. I will say that. This is an SEC game. 21 points is ridiculous. I know Oklahoma struggled, but so is Ole Miss. I don't know if there's something going on behind the scenes, whatever. Going into that Oklahoma-South Carolina game that happened last week, Jackson Arnold came in the game with about 9 minutes left to go in the first quarter. Yeah, the first quarter, not the first half. Michael Hawkins, the Oklahoma starter, threw a pick 6, couldn't move the ball. Again, he's had trouble throwing the ball all year long, and it was 21-0 South Carolina, so they pulled him, put Jackson Arnold in the game, and he was making some plays. He threw for 225 yards and a touchdown, no interceptions. Obviously, their offense struggled to move, don't get me wrong, but after Jackson Arnold went in the first quarter, the rest of the game, the final score would have been 14-9. So, yeah, the final was 35-9, but when Arnold went in, South Carolina only scored 14 points, and Oklahoma put some points on the board. So I think Arnold's going to be their guy, and I think if there's one spot, a weak spot of this Ole Miss defense that's been exposed, it's been that secondary. And not that they've been bad, but the defensive line and that front seven is just that good. And I don't think it'd be a smart idea to play Michael Hawkins, who is heavily involved in an option style offense, constantly running the ball, constantly handing the ball off. I think Arnold's going to be their guy who can throw the ball around a little bit. A guy who I think it was a 5-star maybe coming out of high school, either a high 4 or a 5-star. Potential through the roof. He just hasn't shown it. But last week he played well. So if you're Ole Miss, I think you prepare for Jackson Arnold or maybe a little bit of that South Carolina situation with the 2 quarterback deal. I don't know. We'll find out. But again, I don't think Hawkins is going to be the guy who starts this game for Oklahoma.
Absolutely. Zach and I will update a little bit more on this Oklahoma Ole Miss matchup throughout the week. And obviously, we'll try to get back on a podcast probably around Thursday or Friday to talk a little bit just about the preview of the game as a whole and our predictions as usual. But just kind of a little short preview, my preview from Zach's comments right there. It's going to be a defensive line versus defensive line type of game.
Yeah.
Ole Miss defensive line is elite. Oklahoma's got a pretty elite interior defensive line, and then obviously a really good linebacker in Danny Stutzman, and they'll be gritty back there in the secondary. They're not a big secondary, but they'll be gritty back there. They have some bigger, stockier guys who are going to try to come up in the run game. They don't allow a lot of rushing yards, just like the Ole Miss rushing defense. So I think it's going to be a really defensive oriented game to start, and we'll have to see which offense can pull away. But like Zach said, this is very odd coming into this game as a 21-point favorite for Ole Miss, considering the way the offense has looked for Ole Miss in recent weeks. But then again, this is an Oklahoma team that has struggled offensively. So we'll have to see what they look like with Joe John Finley at the helm calling plays, and obviously Jackson Arnold back at quarterback for Oklahoma. I believe that's all we got for you guys this week. Is that all you got, Zach?
That's all I got, Kim.
That's all we got for you guys this week. Make sure to watch the Ole Miss game this weekend on Saturday. If you're not in the stands, it'll be Saturday on ESPN at 11 a.m. Throughout the week, we'll update with injury report on the rebelwalk.com. Injury report will come out Wednesday. We'll talk a little bit about that in our next podcast. With that being said, make sure to stay tuned to the rebelwalk.com for all your Ole Miss sports needs.